Hey everyone, it's Susan Pierce Thompson and welcome to the weekly vlog. So last week I shot the vlog in my office in my bunny slippers, essentially, in my pink flannel pajama bottoms and slippers. And I talked about how I hadn't been doing well and that I'd been going through a rough time and I didn't quite know what it was about. And I talked about how leaning into my bright lines had really helped. This week, I'm happy to report that the funk has passed, and it was bad. It lasted 3 or 4 weeks, and there were times during that I'm calling it like an existential crisis or a dark night of the soul, or that's kind of what it felt like. There were times when I was feeling so lost and so unmoored, ungrounded, that I was driving down the road, kind of looking at passersby and thinking, how are you functioning? Like, what do you believe? What community do you belong to? What's grounding you into this earth? Do you have like a framework that you're following or some kind of community that's buoying you up? And it was thoughts like that that made it clear that the combination of leaving my 12-step program, which I was so devoted to for so long, and my religion in pretty short order had thrown me into kind of a feeling of ungroundedness that I'd never really encountered. The religion and the 12-step grounding had both been there since my early 20s. And to give them both up in a fairly short amount of time, it had a big impact. And I noticed during that time also, I'd be sitting there eating my breakfast or whatever, minding my business, and this voice would come up in my head that would say, I hate my life. I hate my business. And like, I just don't think that way. I typically have a very positive, deep subconscious that sends me thoughts like, I love my life, and oh, I feel so blessed, and oh, I love my bathroom, and just, happy things like that. But I wasn't getting any happy messages. I was getting these. So I thought, I hate my business. I wonder what that's about. And around that time, someone posted in the Bright Lifers community, that she was disgruntled with the marketing of Bright Line Eating and, mostly that, that she felt conflicted because she loves Bright Line Eating, but at the same time, the emails that she gets and stuff that she wasn't loving it. And it was, she felt conflicted. And I posted back and I was like, I feel you. Like, I feel, in that existential funk, I was feeling the same thing. And, I thought back to the decision I made early in Bright Line Eating to, do this affiliate marketing thing, which is basically, people who have email lists like me, support each other, right? Not all of them universally, but like strategically, the ones that you like, who you think are doing good stuff, you send an email for their stuff and they send an email for your stuff. And in that way, you reach a much bigger audience. It's really how Bright Line Eating has grown as fast as it has. And hearing this woman say that she didn't love receiving those emails, I thought, why aren't we giving people an option to opt out of those? I did have someone on my team working on that a couple years ago, and she didn't work out as an employee. And when she left, that project got lost in the shuffle, essentially. And it hit me again like a ton of bricks in this low place that I was at. I need to give people an option to not receive those emails. It's funny because several people in that thread said, I actually like receiving those emails. Susan vets stuff for us, and I often find stuff that I think is really interesting in that mix. I ignore the ones that I don't like, and, I appreciate the ones that I do like. I click on stuff that, ends up being a good thing for me. And a lot of people pointed out, I'm kind of grateful for those emails because that's how I found Susan and Bright Line Eating, and other people posted, yeah, I feel the same way. I don't want to receive those emails. So, one of the productive things that came out of that period of angst is that I'm happy to announce that you can now opt out of those emails if you don't want to receive them. If you want to keep receiving emails from me about the weekly vlog or a webinar that I do or whatever, but you don't want to receive emails telling you about anyone else's stuff, every time we send an email out, which I think one is going out tomorrow now, that tells you about someone else's stuff, there will be a little line at the bottom that says, if you don't want to receive these anymore, click here. And all you got to do is click on that link and our system will opt you out of receiving those. So I'm excited about that and I feel good about that. So for those of you who are doing a little happy dance now, you're welcome. And those who want to stay opted in, stay opted in. You will sometimes, there's some things I tell you about that I believe in more than anything else I know, like the Food Revolution Summit and Ari Whitten's Energy Blueprint. I mean, there's things that I share with you that are life-saving. And anyway, but if you don't want to receive them, absolutely don't receive them. I love the idea of how important it is that everyone gets to be at choice. We are at choice. It's one of the good things about living in the world we live in right now. Most of us are at choice. So I want to talk more about this whole, feeling unmoored and, not sure about what I believe. I sat in it. I considered for a hot second going back to my 12-step program. I never considered going back to my religion. That one feels really clear to me. But I didn't go back to either. And I sat in the angst and the feeling of lostness and the existential pull on me and the feeling of, I don't know what I believe. And I was talking to a friend of mine, really good friend of mine, and she called me out on it. She said, Susan, you do know what you believe. She said, you're telling yourself right now that you don't, but actually you do. And I was so bought into the story in that moment that I'm lost and I don't know what I believe, that her words felt like a smack upside the head. And when I considered them for just a second, I was like, you know what? You're right. I do. I mean, in terms of the unknowable, right? All I know is that I believe in some kind of unknowable essence, right? I don't make any claims about being clear about what God is. That's not what I'm saying. But for example, the unknowable essence that I believe in is purely and definitively love and kindness and caring and compassion and forgiveness and mercy. There's no vengeance or retribution or punishment in that at all for me. So that's one example of something that I believe. Anyway, the days passed and I washed in and out of this torturous, lost place. And then it passed. And for about 48 hours, I was not willing to claim that it had passed because I was so shell-shocked from how bad it had been that it felt like almost a betrayal to the dark place I'd been in to say that it had lifted. And maybe there was some sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop because it sometimes would come in and out, right? And so I was kind of waiting for it to come back. And then right around the time that I gave the first webinar with Everett last week, I had a really enjoyable time on that webinar. And the joy that I felt after that was the capstone of okay, it really has passed. I'm fine. And then my little eye that I've developed in Bright Line Eating that says, seek the lesson after every binge, after every break, after every trauma, after every cry, after every argument, seek the lesson. Where's the gift? Where's the lesson? How are we moving forward better, stronger, more unstoppable because of this? And I started seeking the lesson. And the lesson was there right away, so clearly. And the lesson was, I feel really, for the first time, strong in my own beliefs. I feel like in that suffering, I grew a root. I grew some strength. I grew some conviction. I grew some sense of owning my own perspective on things. Even if there's no organized body of writings that elucidates it, even if there's no large community of people around the world that are practicing it, even if I'm not plugged into any specific, laid out framework, I know what I believe, and I feel clear and proud, honestly, of my own perspective. I own it. And I'm not going back to any other way. Like the notion of the self-authoring mind, which I talked about in my vlog, Faith and Adult Development. I have a self-authoring mind, and I am choosing my perspective on this world. And at the moment, it doesn't line up perfectly with any laid out, structured belief system that involves a large community of people. And for the first time, I became okay with that. And then I started to think at a meta level about the value of suffering and about how the things that matter most to me in life I have suffered for. And that includes my Bright Line Eating journey. Absolutely, without fail. If you've been doing Bright Line Eating for any stretch of time, you have suffered for it. And the longer you do Bright Line Eating, the more you suffer for it. It's sort of the same way that marriages, when they've lasted a long, long time, come to matter because, I'm sorry, but you don't get to stay married for 10 or 20 or 29 or 39 or 49 years without suffering for your marriage. And when you hold on to something through the suffering, you grow a root. You develop a depth of appreciation for that you just can't get any other way. There are psychologists who posit that one of the reasons that the bond between parents and their children is so strong is that parents suffer so much, especially in the early days of raising those kids, right? To get a baby to 6 months alive requires so much suffering, it's unreal. I remember when my twins were newborns, I remember calling a friend of mine who didn't have any kids, and I said, there's some kind of conspiracy going on. I was whacked out on sleep deprivation, but I believed it. I was like, there is a conspiracy. So many people have had kids and nobody's telling you how horrible it is. It's so horrible. This is the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I cannot believe that nobody told me it was going to be this bad. Oh, we suffer for our babies. Seriously. And as we watch ourselves be willing to walk through that suffering, we grow to value them so much. So if your Bright Line Eating is feeling hard, it's feeling like suffering, which it does sometimes, and you're walking through that, I just want you to know that there's value in that suffering. You are growing roots in a new perspective, a new identity, a new way of relating to yourself around food. And if you don't turn back, if you decide to be unstoppable through that suffering, it will matter more to you than you will ever know. So this vlog is for anyone who's ever stuck with something through the suffering and come out the other end and decided that it was worth it. That's where I'm at today, and I love you, and I'll see you next week.